You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. In 2023, Seattle voters were presented with a new approach to housing, mixed-income public housing, where rent from higher-earning tenants would offset the rent of people making below the area median income. It was dubbed social housing by its supporters. Seattle voters approved the idea and then, a couple years later, chose to give it a lot of money through a new tax on employers who pay individual salaries over $1 million. Now the rubber is hitting the road. Seattle's social housing developer purchased its first property in June. I recently went to see the apartment building in Belltown and met with Tiffani McCoy. She's the interim CEO of the social housing developer. The building is called Ilara at the Market, and it isn't what you might expect from public housing. It's a newer, high-end structure. I met McCoy in a spacious lobby with an indoor fireplace and a coffee station. And I asked her why they chose this to be the first building for social housing in Seattle.
It kind of worked out really poetically, to be honest. Like, it's right next to Pike Place. For folks who remember, Pike Place was at risk of being sold off, but it was a group of citizens that decided to bring it into public ownership and hold it through the Pike Place Public Development Authority. So it's kind of, in my opinion, poetic for our first building to just very luckily be right next to that. We have now brought this private asset into public ownership in perpetuity. It also helps that this is what is called a Class A asset, so it's been built very recently. There's not a lot of deferred maintenance. There are a mix of studios, 1s and 2-bedroom units. There's lots of communal space, which is really important to us because we are going to be implementing a resident governance model. So we need places for residents to meet. And also it just has really beautiful views. And we wanted to make a really bold statement that social housing is for everyone, regardless of your income. There's kind of this inherent thought in our country that if you don't make a lot of money, you shouldn't live in places that don't have deferred maintenance or mold or other issues, but we fundamentally disagree with that. We think everyone should have access to high quality housing. It's one of the most basic fundamental human needs. So those are some of the statements we wanted to make with our flagship development.
Yeah, that kind of gets in front of my next question, which is, this just seems like a really nice new building. And I think it might surprise some people to see this level of purchase from the social housing developer right away. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me more about that philosophy that you spoke about, the sort of reason, to go for a building of this caliber?
Yeah, well, first we wanted to acquire something quickly after receiving the first social housing tax proceeds. Just regardless of some popular opinion, the social housing developer has not been sitting on money for the past couple of years just waiting for an opportunity. We only got the first installment of the social housing tax that was passed by voters last year in March of this year. So then in June, we made our first acquisition announcement. So I was also one of the drafters of the initiative for this model, and it was really important to us to be able to acquire and build, because acquisitions come online so much quicker. We can start to show proof of concept. We can start to build out our portfolio. We will be announcing in the next couple of months some new construction sites of predominantly family size units, which we so desperately need. But the other statements that we made with this building is everyone deserves access to high quality housing. We want to be investing in a public asset for the long term. We are prohibited from selling this building. So every decision we make on maintenance and operations is for 100 plus years and even further than that. So we wanted to make sure that we were buying a building that didn't have a lot of deferred maintenance, that was had all of the operations up and running, and that had that communal space for resident governance councils, and was also in the heart of our downtown, which so many people are not able to afford because of our cross-subsidy model. Because we have higher income residents and we also have lower income residents, we're able to be a lot more flexible and nimble in ways that other developers are not. And we have this really clear voter mandate to uphold as well.
You mentioned kind of right, in the heart of downtown, right down the road from Pike Place Market. El Gaucho's right next door, First Avenue kind of nightlife spots up the hill, the Sculpture Garden's not far. Yeah, this really does seem like a rich neighborhood for residents to explore and enjoy. You mentioned a rooftop views. Maybe we could go check that out.
Let's go look at it.
Cool. We're on the roof now. Absolutely gorgeous view of the Puget Sound. You can see out across, I don't know if that's Bainbridge across the way or what, but just a beautiful spot to hang out. And I wonder if we can find some shade because I'm actually really hot. Tiffani and I find some shade past a group of residents chatting in the sun near a corner with a fenced-in turfed area for dogs. We spoke about the apartments reserved for lower-income residents. After taking over the building, the social housing developer announced it would fill 15 apartments for people making 30% of the area median income. So single residents would need to earn about $34,000 a year to qualify. News of the building has sparked a lot of interest. The social housing developer got 10,000 applicants to live in the Alara within a 2-week period, and more than 7,000 of those were for the initial 15 low-income units. Can we talk a little bit about, the people who applied, that 10,000 number? The majority of them were in the bottom 30% of the income scale, right? And the model here is to have a mix of higher end, middle income, and lower income folks. That's sort of the baseline of making this a sustainable model long term. Did that proportion of lower income applicants concern you at all, just because of, again, the incredible demand that there is at that scale of income?
I'm really glad you asked this question because I want to be really clear with everyone that we only announced that we would in the future have the first 15 units open to those that are at the 30% area median income. And then the next 45 units would be going to those that are at 50% of the area median income. So it shows that we communicated well and effectively. And when we were out doing our pop-ups around the city, just in case people weren't on the internet or whatnot and just getting into communities where there is high displacement, it shows that we were effective in our messaging. I still think that it shows the deep, deep, deep need. And I think that this is a great education moment for folks to realize that whatever 30% units we as a social housing developer are adding, or 50% area median income units that we're adding, are brand new affordable housing units that were not planned through the Office of Housing, that were not in the pipeline already. So our first 15 units at 30% AMI are new. So even though some are like, you're not really creating new housing until you construct, that is true. We're not physically creating brick and mortar, but we are creating new low-income units that didn't exist before. So thank you for asking that.
You're basically carving out new low-income units from the existing housing stock, but that is still new at that income level that wasn't there before.
Correct. Those were all of those vacant units that are on right now or about to be filled were market rate units. So those were not set asides for lower income individuals.
And what does that rent look like? What is the lower income, medium income, and then the eventual higher income level look like for a 1-bedroom?
I know studio off the top of my head.
Studio.
So
what
studio for
look
the
like?
30% area median income is $600 a month. And then we do not have the 50% units open yet. So I don't have that number off the top of my head, but we are still figuring out exactly what the rent looks like for what we are calling modest market. We want to be underneath market rent. We are not a private developer that is out trying to make as much money as we can off of renters. But again, we just received the funding in March. A lot of our staff are staffing up in the past couple of months, so some of these questions are live. But we also might have a situation where there aren't the vacancies that we were anticipating because maybe people do want to stay here. We announced a rent freeze. We announced getting rid of bike storage, pest fees, the ratio utility billing system. We freezed rent for 2 years for existing residents. And we're doing all of these social events and creating this community, hopefully, community cohesion. So we might not. We're just going to have to live and see because we also want people to stay in this model and prove that folks that are higher income, we're talking middle or low income, want to live in cross-class communities.
So if you don't get those vacancies long term, does the model still work in this building?
It does still work in this building. It's just going to look like a different rental mix because, again, we're also not trying to kick people out of their housing in order to achieve this quote-unquote ideal unit mix. That would be antithetical. The social housing developer is anti-displacement. So it's just that these are our goals. These are our set-asides. The first 15 vacancies will be for 30% AMI. The next 45 will be for 50%. But we're not going to shove people out in order to achieve that. It's antithetical. So just when we announce our next acquisition, which our development goals were 300 acquisitions for 2026, and then we are also, like I said, going to be announcing some new construction sites. It takes a long time to build, to permit, all of that process. So we're looking at 3 years on that, but we are still on target to meet most of our goals.
What has it been like to be in that transition process? I suppose it's communicating with residents. It's also sort of seeing what the residents decide to do, because as you say, people might not decide to move, or they might decide to move. And it's sort of like you're waiting to hear how it lands, I guess, your first acquisition here.
I think I'm in a very unique position since I came from the organization and the community group that launched the two initiatives. I was the campaign manager for both of those alongside dozens and dozens of people. So to be in the interim CEO role while we announce our first building has been like the chance of a lifetime, and it's incredibly humbling. And I deeply believe to my core that this vision and this mission can work, but it's not going to happen overnight. We're in it for the long run. Again, these buildings cannot be sold off. We are not looking at short-term gains. Our goals, what success looks like to us, is going to be different. It's not necessarily going to, well, it is absolutely not going to be how much rent can we get to give back to stakeholders. That's not our model. But we're going to be looking at, like, with our property management, instead of providing bonuses based on how much rent is garnered, we're starting to discuss, like, maybe the bonuses for property management are tied to resident satisfaction or resident longevity. We want to talk with the residents about what they think those bonuses should be striped to. So we are building out some of these systems with residents as we go, and then we'll just keep iterating from there. So it is really a momentous moment. People across the nation are looking at us. I talk to people still all across the nation. I talk to folks in Chicago who now have a similar developer, different flavor. But I think that there's a lot of hope, but we also know we have a tremendous mandate and we have a lot of eyes on us. So we are just working as hard as we can. And also happy to announce that we just finished our first audit with the state of Washington and came back with no findings and no concerns from them that we have to work on. We're doing well, and we're continuing to implement further good governors.
What about new construction? What's the timeline for that, and what sort of issues are you going to be facing in terms of site acquisition, things like that?
So we have been for the last 2 months really actively trying to get site control, it's called, and trying to put forward purchase and sale agreements. Again, can't share more right now because we're still in active negotiations, but we are looking to announce 2 to 4 land sites for sure by the end of this year. We want to be all over the city. So right now we are in Council District 7. We are looking to be everywhere in the city. We especially, though, want to make sure that we are going into communities that have not taken on their share of the affordable housing crisis. So specifically Districts 4, District 5, District 6. But we want to be all
North
over.
End?
The North End, yes.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're announcing sites there as well. So we have a wonderful real estate team. They are in active negotiations. That's all I can say now. But yeah, we are going to be announcing 2 to 4 by the end of this year, hopefully in the next couple of months.
So the model is mixed income. So the model is a certain amount of lower income, a certain amount of mid income, and a certain amount of higher income, or like more market rate, basically, housing. If you start with the lower income housing, and then you open up the larger chunk of the middle income or the modest income housing, what if when you open up the higher income, those applicants don't come in? Like, is there a risk of that? Like there is a stigma that develops or something like that. Like the people who can afford to go elsewhere turn up their noses and they say, not for me. Is that a potential pitfall of this model long term?
I genuinely don't think so. Just having been on the campaign trail for both of these initiatives, hearing people that are tech workers that make over 80% of the area median income. 80% is where we usually cap affordable housing income in the city of Seattle. I mean, nationwide too. That would desperately love to live in this building because they also know who their landlord's going to be forever. They know the values. They know that they're not going to be gouged every place that they can. They know that they get to be part of actually having a significant say in their building through resident governance councils. They know that they'll also, with our new construction buildings, live in a passive house build, which is really one of the highest environmental standards. We did a lottery. Our charter calls for us to do a lottery. So for all of the units, according to the Seattle's First in Time law, everything that's under an 80% AMI unit will be open to the lottery. So it'll be a random drawing. Those over 80% AMI, so our modest market units, will be first in time because that's what the first in time ordinance says. So we We do not see any of those units coming open soon, but if folks do end up saying that they don't want to renew their lease with the social housing developer, then we will see that in real time. But folks that are over 80% AMI are increasingly rent burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income in rent. Architects desperately want to live in social housing. They're at that 80% threshold. So I think time will tell, but I'm really, really not worried, because we're also giving people a choice. Do you want to spend your money on the private market? You certainly can do that, and you can be in a community that's similar to you. Or do you want to spend your income on a public asset, and some of your income is then going to cross-subsidizing those in the building, but also you're investing in this asset for the long term, and then you get to be part of all of these other benefits. So it's a choice that we're now providing people. So
why were you so passionate to get involved in this issue, Tiffani? Because obviously you ran the campaign, you're now the interim CEO. You're really dedicating a good chunk of your life to this model, this social housing model. Why was that the path that you took?
Before I co-founded House Our Neighbors, the organization that ran the two initiatives, before I launched that, co-launched that, I worked at Real Change. So I worked directly with our unhoused neighbors. We were part of 2 lawsuits against the city to stop the sweeps. So I took down depositions from residents and from unhoused neighbors that had been swept and lost some of their most prized possessions, things you can't get back. The trauma that comes with coming back from selling the Real Change paper and not having your tent or your possessions there. And we had fought, when I was the advocacy director there, for more housing, more affordable housing, more shelter, more transitional shelter, for housing and essential needs, all of the programs. But after a few years, it just is like, these are all really important gains, don't get me wrong, but they're drops in the bucket. And we are getting more people entering homelessness than are exiting homelessness. And we also have this interesting situation in our affordable housing space that has been set up by the federal government, where we means test the heck out of everything. And if you make more money in a specific building, you could risk losing that position, and then you are spending way more money in the private market. So we actually are creating benefit cliffs. We're locking people into poverty. So I started looking at other international models alongside folks in House Our Neighbors, and we really thought that we have this massive missing philosophy around housing. We have affordable housing, which we desperately need, but then the only other thing you have is private market, unless you can afford to buy your own. If you look, though, outside of our country, which I know some folks are remiss to do, you see that housing is actually treated as a public good in a large swath of the rest of the globe. We don't treat housing here as public infrastructure like we do libraries, roads, schools. We treat it as a commodity, as an asset on a balance sheet. And
as a privilege.
And as a privilege. You're exactly right. So we thought this is the missing piece. The only way that we can really address the housing crisis at scale is if we start to bring it more into public ownership, and we start to treat it as public infrastructure and a public good, and we create it as a universal benefit. We still are going to have specific set-asides for our lowest income neighbors, but we also want them to be able to make more money over their lifetime and not lose that housing unit. This is anathema to social housing models internationally. So that's what really drove me. It's also vendors at Real Change wondering, why do I only have the opportunity to live with other low-income neighbors? Like, I love my low-income neighbors, but like, why do I not get to move into those high opportunity zones? Why am I still segregated in my housing choices? Why do I have to live in dilapidated buildings and have to be thankful for that? These are all really critical questions, and I know if I did not work at Real Change and get to work with like our most vulnerable residents, I wouldn't have come to believe in this model at the depth that I do. And I do fundamentally, to my core, believe this can work.
Tiffani McCoy, we are sitting in the first building purchased by the Seattle social housing developer. We're getting a nice breeze in.
Yes, we are.
From the Puget Sound. I can hear the seagulls. I can hear some, traffic and bustle down on the street. It's a sunny day. I feel like we should both have cocktails in our hands right now or something. How does it feel? I mean, just before we go, to be in this space, and what are your hopes for the future?
Again, I'm just like very humbled and deeply proud and hold all of the tensions and the road ahead, and know that people are rooting for us, not just locally but nationally. Like, I really do mean that. People are rooting for us. We are the Seattle model. Even though we're just sitting in our first building, when I talk to folks like Chicago, like I did the other day, we want to be more like the Seattle model. Other people are like, we're going to take the Chattanooga, Tennessee model or the Atlanta model. I'm glad that you are just taking a new model and running with it, and that you are complementing the current affordable housing space. So like every model that is taking up this mixed income social housing idea is a win, especially during the time of Trump posing an existential threat to everything. My hopes for the future are that we deliver as a social housing developer, but that we also be really open and honest to feedback. Again, we are the only developer that has residents as the majority of the governing board, and that bakes in resident governance. There are going to be learning moments, and we need to be open to that and not defensive to that. We are going to reimagine what property management looks like, what asset management looks like. So I just want people to trust the process, hold us accountable, but also give us the benefit of the doubt and at least bring issues to us directly if there are issues, not just, take to social media or whatever else. I and my team are very open to public input and feedback. So give us that opportunity to have that dialogue. And then I just look forward to announcing these new construction sites and continuing to show how we're different, how we're additive, and how we, alongside our affordable housing partners, our community land trust partners, our co-op partners, are uniting to put pressure against the private market that dominates one of our most fundamental human needs. So those things excite me.
Tiffani McCoy is the interim CEO of the Seattle Social Housing Developer. Thank you very much for sitting down with me.
Thank you.
Again, Tiffani says the social housing developer plans to announce 2 to 4 sites for new construction by the end of the year. It also has a goal to manage 300 units by the end of 2026, which would mean acquiring another Alara-sized apartment building before the end of the year. Would you like to live in a social housing setup, or how do you feel about Seattle pioneering this model in the United States? Leave us a voicemail, 206-221-3213, or you can email soundside@kuow.org to weigh in. 206-221-3213 is the voicemail number. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at kuow.org or on your favorite podcast app.